No one in Cedar Creek could have imagined that. In the spring of 1892, a penniless young widow struggling to save her sick daughter would also save the richest man in the Arizona Territory. She never knew the wounded Apache stranger she rescued was Jack Redhawk, a wealthy ranch owner who had abandoned his fortune in search of a love that money could never buy. Before their story was over, he would give up everything he had not for himself, but to save the life of a little girl who wasn't even his own. But to understand how it all happened, we have to go back to the beginning, back to a time when Jack Redhawk had everything except the one thing he wanted most: someone to love him for who he was, not for what he owned. The summer sun blazed over the red mesas of the Arizona Territory, painting the endless prairie in shades of gold. Longhorn cattle grazed across rolling hills, and dust drifted lazily behind riders crossing the open range. It was another ordinary morning in Cedar Creek, but there was nothing ordinary about Jack Redhawk. At 30 years old, Jack was the richest ranch owner for hundreds of miles. His grandfather had left him an ember more than 20,000 acres of grazing land, thousands of head of cattle, freight warehouse, shares in the stagecoach company, and enough money to make bankers stand whenever he entered the room. People often joked that if Jack wanted to buy half the territory, he could do it before supper. Yet wealth was only part of the legend surrounding him. Jack Redhawk was also the most talked about bachelor in Arizona. Every Saturday night, his black stallion could be seen outside the finest dance hall in Cedar Creek. Women whispered when he walked through the doors. Men envied the easy confidence with which he carried himself. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair, bronze skin, and piercing brown eyes inherited from his Apache mother, Jack possessed a rugged handsomeness that seemed impossible to ignore. Dressed in tailored suits and polished boots, he looked every bit the wealthy cattle baron he had become. The newspapers called him the Apache millionaire. The town called him the Apache every woman wanted, and judging by the number of ladies eager to dance with him, neither title seemed exaggerated. Jack embraced the reputation. He attended lavish parties, raced expensive horses, played cards until dawn, and spent fortunes without a second thought. If a beautiful woman admired a necklace in a shop window, Jack bought it before she finished speaking. If friends suggested a hunting trip, he paid for everyone. To the world, he appeared to have everything a man could ever desire. But appearances could be deceiving. There had been a time when Jack believed love was real. More than once, he had imagined settling down with a woman who loved him for who he was, rather than what he owned. Instead, every romance ended the same way. One woman casually asked how many acres would become hers after marriage. Another wanted to know how much money sat in his bank account. A third secretly questioned his lawyer about his inheritance before she had even accepted his proposal. Each disappointment chipped away at the hope he had once carried. Then came the night that destroyed it completely. Jack was hosting one of his famous summer parties at Red Hawk Ranch. Music echoed through the grand house, while guests laughed beneath crystal chandeliers. Needing a moment of quiet, Jack stepped outside onto the veranda. As he walked past a climbing rose garden, two young women stood only a few yards away, unaware that anyone was listening. "I could never truly love an Apache," one of them said with a soft laugh. Her friend shrugged. "You wouldn't have to love him. You'd only have to marry him." The first woman giggled. "With that kind of fortune, I could learn to overlook almost anything." Both women burst into laughter before disappearing back inside the house. Jack never moved. He simply stood there in the darkness. He didn't confront them. He didn't raise his voice. For the first time in years, he felt something inside him quietly break. Later that night, he sat alone in his grandfather's study. The gold pocket watch his grandfather had carried for decades rested on the desk. Beyond the window stretched thousands of acres of land that now belonged to him. Everything a man could dream of was already his. Everything except a heart that loved him without counting his money first. His grandfather's words echoed in his memory. Money tells you what people want. Hard times tell you who they are. Jack slowly removed the gold watch from his pocket and placed it inside the safe. Next came his diamond ring, then his tailored coat, his polished boots, the expensive belt buckle engraved with the Red Hawk brand by Sunrise. The wealthy ranch owner had disappeared. In his place stood an ordinary cowboy, wearing faded denim, dusty boots, and a worn hat that no one would notice. His old ranch foreman watched in confusion. "Where are you going, Mr. Red Hawk?" Jack saddled a plain bay horse instead of his price stallion. He carried only a small bedroll, an old revolver, and enough cash to survive like any wandering ranch hand. He looked once more at the magnificent ranch his grandfather had built. Then he quietly answered, "To find out whether anyone can love the man before they see the fortune." With that, Jack rode away from Red Hawk Ranch, leaving behind his wealth, his name, and the life everyone envied. 3 days after leaving Red Hawk Ranch, Jack was riding through a rugged stretch of Arizona, known as Devil's Ravine. The narrow trail wound between towering red cliffs, where loose rocks and steep drops had claimed more than one careless traveler. His bay horse had been calm all morning. Then, without warning, a rattlesnake slithered out from beneath a sun-baked rock. The frightened horse reared violently. Jack pulled hard on the reins, but it was too late. The animal lost its footing, sending both horse and rider tumbling down the rocky slope. Jack crashed against a large boulder before rolling to the bottom of the ravine. A sharp pain shot through his shoulder and leg, leaving him barely able to breathe. For several long minutes, he lay motionless beneath the blazing afternoon sun. When he finally forced himself to sit up, he realized his horse had run off, and his left leg refused to support his weight. He called for help. Twice, wagons passed along the road above him. Both drivers looked down into the ravine. Neither stopped. One man even shook his head after noticing Jack's Apache features and ragged clothes before snapping the reins and continuing down the trail. Jack gave a bitter smile. Without his expensive suit or famous name, he had become invisible. Late that afternoon, another wagon approached. A young woman guided an old mule along the dusty road, while a little girl sat quietly beside her, wrapped in a faded blue blanket despite the summer heat. "Ma," the little girl whispered, pointing toward the ravine. "Someone's down there." The woman immediately pulled the wagon to a stop. Her name was Maine Collins. At only 25 years old, she already carried the exhaustion of someone who had lived through far more sorrow than joy. Since losing her husband 2 years earlier, she had struggled to keep their small homestead alive while caring for her only daughter. Without hesitation, Maine climbed carefully down the rocky slope. When she reached Jack, she knelt before him. "Can you move?" she asked gently. "I'll live," Jack answered through clenched teeth. "Though I'm not sure my leg agrees." A faint smile crossed her face. "Then let's get you home before you prove it wrong." With Maine supporting one side and the little girl bravely helping the other, they slowly guided Jack back up the steep hillside. "You don't owe me this," Jack said as they reached the wagon. "I don't have much money." Maine looked at him with quiet surprise. "I wasn't helping your wallet," she replied. "I was helping a man." Those simple words struck Jack harder than his fall. By sunset, they arrived at a small weathered cabin, standing alone on a patch of dry land. The fences leaned crookedly. The barn roof sagged with age. Inside, the furniture was old. The walls were bare, and the pantry held little more than beans, cornmeal, and a single loaf of bread. Still, the little cabin felt warmer than the grand mansion Jack had left behind. Maine insisted that Jack take the only bed, while she spread blankets on the floor beside her daughter. The little girl's name was Sam. She was only 10 years old, but illness had stolen much of her strength. Her cheeks were pale, and every few minutes a deep cough shook her small body. That first night, Jack awoke to the sound of muffled coughing. He found Maine sitting beside Sam's bed, pressing a cool cloth against her daughter's burning forehead. "It's all right, sweetheart," she whispered softly. "Mama's here." Sam managed a weak smile before drifting back to sleep. The next morning, Jack noticed something else. Whenever food was served, Maine always placed the largest portion on Sam's plate when only one biscuit remained. Maine quietly claimed she wasn't hungry. Jack watched her drink water while pretending she had already eaten. She was starving herself so her daughter wouldn't have to. No one had ever sacrificed like that for him. For the first time in years, Jack sat at a table where no one cared how much land he owned, how much money rested in his bank account, or what his last name was. To Maine Collins, he was simply an injured stranger who needed help. And to Jack Redhawk, that simple act of kindness felt more valuable than every acre he had inherited. A week passed, and Jack's injuries slowly began to heal. Each morning, he repaired broken fence posts, chopped firewood, and carried water from the creek before Maine could stop him. It was the least he could do for the woman who had saved his life. Those quiet days became the happiest Jack had known in years. In the evenings, Sam would sit on the porch while Jack carved little animals from pieces of cedar wood. She laughed whenever he made funny voices for the tiny horses and rabbits he carved with his pocket knife. One afternoon, she looked up at him with hopeful eyes. "Do you think I'll ever be strong enough to ride a horse?" Jack smiled warmly. "You will. You promise." "I promise." For a brief moment, Eshty believed him. So did Jack. But only 2 nights later, everything changed. Jack woke just before dawn to the sound of violent coughing. He rushed into the small bedroom. Sam was struggling to breathe. Her tiny body trembled beneath the blankets, and blood stained the white handkerchief she pressed against her lips. Maine knelt beside the bed, tears streaming down her face. "Please, please stay with me," she whispered as she held her daughter's hand. Jack immediately saddled the mule and raced to fetch the town doctor. The old physician arrived an hour later. He examined Sam carefully, listening to her lungs before quietly removing his spectacles. His expression told the truth before he spoke. "I'm sorry." Maine stared at him. "There must be something you can do." The doctor slowly shook his head. "I've done everything I know. There has to be another medicine. There isn't not here." Silence filled the cabin. Finally, the doctor spoke again. "There are specialists in Phoenix. Perhaps one of them could save her." Hope flickered across Maine's face. "Then we'll go." The doctor's eyes lowered. "The treatment will cost more than most ranches are worth." The hope disappeared as quickly as it had come. After the doctor left, Maine sat alone on the porch until sunset. Jack found her staring across the dry fields her husband had once worked. "This land is all I have left," she said quietly. Jack remained silent. "If I sell it," she swallowed hard, "I might be able to save my little girl." The next morning, a well-dressed man arrived in a polished carriage. His name was Arthur Kane. Everyone in Cedar Creek knew him as a successful land buyer. Few knew how many desperate families he had ruined. Arthur greeted Maine with a warm smile. "I heard your daughter is very ill," he said sympathetically. "I'm terribly sorry." Maine nodded, unable to speak. "I'd like to help." Jack watched the stranger carefully. "There aren't many buyers willing to purchase land this far outside town," Arthur continued. "But because of your situation, I'm prepared to make you a generous offer. He unfolded several legal documents across the kitchen table. The money will be enough to take your daughter to the finest doctors in Phoenix. Maine's hands trembled. This is really enough. Arthur smiled reassuringly. More than enough. Jack studied the papers from across the room. Something about Arthur's smile unsettled him. There seems to be an awful lot of fine print, Jack said. Arthur glanced at him dismissively. And you are just someone staying here. Arthur chuckled. Then perhaps legal matters are best left to those who understand them. Jack wanted to argue. He wanted to read every line himself. But he had no proof that anything was wrong. Maine looked toward the bedroom where Sam slept, her breathing growing weaker with every passing hour. Nothing mattered except saving her daughter, with tears filling her eyes. She picked up the pen. I'm sorry, she whispered, almost as if she were speaking to her late husband. Then she signed her name. Arthur folded the papers immediately. The smile on his face changed. It was no longer kind. It was victorious. Jack felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He suddenly realized that Maine had not just sold her home. She had walked straight into a trap. Arthur Kane wasted no time. The very next morning, 2 wagons loaded with hired men rolled onto the property. They carried hammers, chains, and new locks, as though the little homestead already belonged to them. Maine stepped out onto the porch. Confused. There must be some mistake, she said. We agreed I'd stay until I could take Sam to Phoenix. Arthur climbed down from his carriage, adjusting his expensive gloves. I believe you should read what you signed. He handed her the contract. Maine's hands trembled as she searched the pages. Her face slowly turned white. Buried among the legal language was a clause stating that ownership of the land transferred immediately upon signing, and that she had accepted a token payment as full compensation. The amount written on the contract was less than 1/10 of what Arthur had promised. No, she whispered. That's not what we agreed. Arthur smiled coldly. It is exactly what you signed. You lied to me. No, Mrs. Collins. He tipped his hat mockingly. You simply failed to read. Jack stepped forward, his jaw tightening. You cheated her. Arthur laughed. Can you prove it? Jack had no answer. Everything appeared legal on paper. Arthur nodded toward his men. Throw them out. Within minutes, the hired workers began carrying furniture from the cabin, a small bed, the kitchen table, the rocking chair that had belonged to Maine's husband. Everything was tossed into the yard like worthless junk. Please, Maine cried. My daughter is sick. Give us just a few more days. Arthur didn't even look at her. This property belongs to me now. One of the men carried Sam outside while she coughed weakly beneath her blanket. The sight made Jack's blood boil. He wanted nothing more than to knock Arthur to the ground. But if he did, Arthur would have him arrested, leaving Maine and Sam completely alone. He forced himself to stay still when the last piece of furniture had been thrown into the dirt. Arthur climbed back into his carriage. Before leaving, he looked down at Maine. Business is business. Then he drove away. Silence settled over the abandoned yard. Maine slowly sank to her knees. She wrapped both arms around Sam, holding the frail little girl against her chest as tears streamed down her face. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I tried to save you. Sam reached up with trembling fingers and gently wiped away one of her mother's tears. It's okay, Mama. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm just tired. Jack turned away for a moment. He had seen death before. He had buried friends after cattle raids. He had watched men lose everything in droughts and fires. But nothing had ever hurt like watching a mother blame herself for trying to save her child. That night, the 3 of them took shelter inside an abandoned storage shed a rancher allowed them to use. Rain tapped softly against the wooden roof. Sam's breathing became slower and more uneven with each passing hour. Near midnight, Jack stepped outside. He stared into the darkness for a long time. He had spent weeks hiding from the man he used to be. He wanted someone to love him without knowing his fortune. But now, none of that mattered. Without his wealth, he couldn't hire the best doctors. Without his name, he couldn't fight Arthur Kane in court. Without his power, Sam would die. Jack closed his eyes. There was only one choice left. Before dawn, he quietly saddled a borrowed horse as he tightened the reins. He looked back toward the shed, through a crack in the wall. He could see Maine asleep beside Sam, holding her daughter tightly as if she were afraid to let go. Jack whispered softly, "I'll come back." Then he rode into the darkness, without leaving a note. When Maine awoke the next morning, Jack was gone. She searched outside, calling his name across the empty fields. Only silence answered her. Her shoulders slowly slumped. Another man had walked away, looking down at her sleeping daughter. Maine forced herself not to cry. "I don't blame you," she whispered into the morning wind. "No one should have to carry this burden." She believed Jack had abandoned them because he was afraid of losing a dying child. She never imagined that. At that very moment, the man she loved was racing toward Red Hawk Ranch, determined to return with enough power to save Sam's life and destroy Arthur Kane forever. Jack rode through the night without stopping. His horse splashed through shallow creeks, climbed rocky trails, and crossed miles of open prairie beneath a sky filled with stars. By sunrise, both rider and horse were exhausted. But Jack refused to slow down. Only one thought echoed in his mind. Sam was running out of time. Late the following afternoon, the gates of Red Hawk Ranch finally appeared on the horizon. The ranch hands stared in disbelief as Jack rode into the yard covered in dust. "Mr. Red Hawk," one of them shouted. Jack barely climbed down from the saddle before giving orders. "I need the fastest carriage we own." "Yes, sir." "Prepare fresh horses. Right away. Send riders to Phoenix. Bring me the finest children's doctor they can find. Offer whatever fee it takes." The foreman hesitated. "Whatever fee?" Jack looked him straight in the eye. "I don't care if it costs every dollar I own." Within minutes, the entire ranch burst into motion. Stable hands harnessed 4 powerful horses to the finest carriage on the property. Servants loaded blankets, medicine, clean water, and food. Jack's lawyer, Samuel Brooks, arrived after receiving an urgent telegram. "What happened?" he asked. Jack handed him Arthur Kane's contract. "I want everything you can find on this man." Samuel skimmed through the papers, his face darkened. "I've heard rumors about Kane." "I don't want rumors. I want evidence," Samuel nodded. "Then give me 1 day." By evening, messengers were riding in every direction. Some searched for doctors, others visited the county courthouse. Still others began speaking with families Arthur had dealt with over the years. The truth surfaced quickly. Arthur Kane had built his fortune by preying on desperate people. He targeted widows, farmers suffering after droughts, families drowning in debt. Again and again, he used confusing contracts to steal land legally from people who believed he was helping them. Dozens of victims had remained silent because they thought no one would believe them. Now they finally had someone willing to fight. Samuel gathered signed statements, copies of fraudulent contracts, and witnesses prepared to testify. When he laid the thick stack of evidence on Jack's desk, he quietly said, "This is enough to ruin him." Jack nodded. "Then notify the sheriff." Meanwhile, nearly 40 miles away, Maine sat inside the abandoned storage shed, with Sam resting against her shoulder. The little girl's fever had become unbearable. She no longer had the strength to speak. Every breath sounded shallow and painful. Maine brushed the damp hair from Sam's forehead. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." I promised I'd save you." Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Outside, the wind carried dust across the empty fields where her home had once stood. She thought about Jack. At first, she had been angry. Then she realized anger changed nothing. Perhaps he had simply decided that a poor widow and her dying daughter were more than he could bear. She couldn't blame him. Who would choose such a life? She lowered her head and whispered, "I hope wherever you are, you're happy." At that exact moment, the sound of galloping horses echoed across the prairie. Maine looked up. A magnificent black carriage raced toward the shed, pulled by 4 powerful horses. Behind it rode several armed ranch hands. The carriage stopped only a few feet away. A tall man stepped down. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His boots shone. A silver watch chain rested across his vest. For a brief moment, Maine didn't recognize him. Then he removed his hat. "Jack." He walked directly toward her. "I'm sorry I left without explaining." Maine could barely speak. "You?" Jack knelt beside Sam. His eyes filled with sorrow as he gently touched the little girl's burning forehead. "I had to become the man I was trying to escape." He looked back at Maine. "I needed my name, my money, my power. Because without them, I couldn't save her." Before Maine could answer, another carriage pulled up behind the first. An elderly physician climbed out carrying a leather medical bag. Jack stood and extended his hand toward Maine. "The best children's doctor in Phoenix is here. We're taking Sam to the city. She is not dying today." For the first time in many days, hope returned to Maine's eyes as the doctor carefully lifted Sam into the carriage. Another rider galloped into the camp. It was Samuel Brooks. He handed Jack a folded document. "The sheriff has issued a warrant for Arthur Kane's arrest." Jack looked toward the distant hills where Arthur's ranch stood. His voice was calm. "It's over." Then he climbed into the carriage beside Maine and Sam as the horses surged forward toward Phoenix. Maine reached for Jack's hand. This time he didn't let go. The journey to Phoenix lasted through the night. Inside the carriage, the physician worked without rest, doing everything he could to keep Sam alive until they reached the hospital. Maine never left her daughter's side, holding her small hand while whispering prayers through tear-filled eyes. Jack sat across from them. Every time the carriage struck a rough patch of road, his heart tightened. For the first time in years, money meant nothing to him. It could not guarantee that Sam would live. It could only buy her a chance. When they finally arrived in Phoenix, a team of specialists was already waiting. Jack had paid them to be ready before the carriage even reached the city. The doctors rushed Sam inside. Hours passed. Maine paced the hallway until her legs could barely hold her. Jack stayed beside her without saying a word. Just before sunrise, the chief physician finally stepped out. A gentle smile spread across his tired face. The treatment worked. Maine covered her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. "She's going to live." The doctor nodded. "It will take time for her to recover. But your daughter is going to be just fine." Maine broke down in tears. Jack caught her before she collapsed. For the first time since her husband had died, she allowed herself to believe that the future might still hold happiness. Several weeks later, Sam was well enough to leave the hospital. Color had returned to her cheeks, and the painful cough was gone. The little girl laughed as she chased pigeons outside the hospital gates. Jack smiled. It was the sweetest sound he had ever heard. Meanwhile, Arthur Kane's crimes had finally caught up with him. Using the evidence gathered by Samuel Brooks and testimony from dozens of victims, the sheriff arrested Arthur for fraud, forgery, and stealing land from vulnerable families. The court ruled that his fraudulent contracts were invalid. Every piece of property he had stolen, including Maine's homestead, was returned to its rightful owners. Arthur was sentenced to years behind bars, leaving the courtroom in chains while the people he had cheated watched in silence. A month later, Jack, Maine, and Sam stood once again outside the little cabin that had brought them together. The porch had been repaired. Fresh flowers bloomed beneath the windows. It finally felt like home again. That evening, as the Arizona sun slowly disappeared behind the distant mountains, Jack turned to Maine. "I have one more truth to tell you," he said quietly. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I finally realized that the only way to save Sam was to become Jack Redhawk again." Maine reached for his hand. "I never fell in love with the richest rancher in Arizona," she said softly. "I fell in love with the man who chopped our firewood, shared our last piece of bread, and stayed beside my daughter when she was afraid." Jack's eyes filled with tears. Slowly, he knelt on one knee. "Maine Collins, will you marry me?" She smiled through her tears. "Yes." Before Jack could stand, Sam ran across the yard and wrapped her arms around both of them. "So?" she asked with a grin. "Does this mean I get to call you Papa forever?" Jack laughed, pulling the little girl into his arms. "As long as you'll have me," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I'll always be your Papa." The three of them embraced beneath the glowing Arizona sunset. Jack had once believed that the greatest treasure in the world was the fortune his grandfather had left behind. Now he knew the truth. A loving family was worth far more than all the land, cattle, and gold a man could ever own.